Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a topic that's frankly surrounded by a ton of anxiety and, let's be honest, total misinformation. We're talking about male sexual health, and specifically, the intense pressure of the clock. We're going to keep things purely clinical and reassuring today, busting some of the biggest myths out there by looking strictly at what medical science actually tells us. Let's get right into it. So, we have to start by addressing the massive elephant in the room, right? In our society, there's this wildly common, incredibly anxiety-inducing belief that men need to last for hours and hours to be considered good in bed. It's a narrative pushed relentlessly by movies, pop culture, and internet rumors. The assumption is just longer automatically equals better. And on the flip side, there's this deep-seated fear that if a guy finishes quickly, it literally means something is medically wrong with him. But is that actually true? Well, to figure that out, we first need to understand how medical researchers even measured this concept of time. Okay, so when you read a medical study about how long sex lasts, you're going to come across a term called IELT. That stands for intravaginal ejaculatory latency time. Try saying that 5 times fast. But seriously, this is the medical baseline. When researchers talk about intercourse duration, they aren't starting the stopwatch when a couple starts kissing. They aren't counting the time spent cuddling or doing foreplay. They are looking exclusively at one specific phase, from the exact moment of penetration until ejaculation. That is it. It's a very narrow, specific window of time. And honestly, understanding this definition is absolutely crucial to dismantling those myths we just talked about. And this distinction perfectly illustrates why we all get so confused about time. Let's look at a highly realistic, totally healthy scenario. Imagine a couple spends 20 minutes enjoying foreplay, and then they have about 6 minutes of actual IELT, meaning the penetrative phase. If you add that up, you're looking at a 25 to 30-minute session. Suddenly, the math looks way more realistic than that exhausting Hollywood myth of a 4-hour marathon, doesn't it? But because people conflate the total time spent together with just that penetrative phase, they panic. Recognizing this difference drastically shifts the paradigm away from all those stressful, heavy expectations. Now let's look at the actual clinical data drawn from global research, because the numbers might surprise you. If that IELT is less than 3 minutes, medically speaking, that's considered relatively short. But here is the real shocker. 3 to 7 minutes is the normal medical average. Let me repeat that. The global average sits right around 5 to 7 minutes. Moving up from there, 7 to 13 minutes is found to be highly satisfactory for many couples. And take a look at the high end. More than 20 minutes of continuous penetration is not always better. In fact, as you'll see in a moment, it can actually cause physical issues. So what does this all mean? It means that time is a remarkably poor metric for success. Relying on a stopwatch it's missing the entire point of intimacy. According to the source material, the quality of sex does not rely on duration. It relies on mutual satisfaction, open communication, generous foreplay, emotional connection, the whole shebang. A session that lasts only a few minutes can be deeply fulfilling and joyful for both people. Conversely, a marathon session that just drags on can leave both partners feeling physically exhausted, sore, and totally disconnected. But, of course, there are always outliers. If we establish that 5 to 7 minutes is the clinical norm, we really have to ask, what is happening medically when individuals fall significantly outside those standard timeframes? Let's transition into looking at the actual medical complications that can crop up when things go much faster or, surprisingly enough, much slower than average. First off, let's talk about things moving too fast. We need to be super clear about the difference between a totally normal variation and an actual clinical condition. Look, it is incredibly common to have an occasional quick finish. If you're highly excited, under a ton of stress at work, if you haven't been intimate in a while, or even if you just haven't been sleeping well, these everyday lifestyle factors can easily cause rapid ejaculation. That does not mean you have a disease. However, clinical premature ejaculation, or PE, is a different story. This is defined as consistently ejaculating under 1 minute after penetration, experiencing a severe lack of control over it, and crucially, it causing significant distress and anxiety in your life. That's when a doctor's assessment is needed. On the flip side, we need to completely debunk this wild myth that lasting forever is some kind of superpower. It's really not. Let's look at the clinical realities of going too long, which can sometimes point to a condition called delayed ejaculation. The physical toll here is incredibly real, and it's often a source of quiet frustration for both people involved. For the guy, it can lead to severe physical fatigue, muscle pain, and ironically, losing an erection simply due to prolonged physical exertion. For the partner, it often leads to painful friction, vaginal dryness, and a highly increased risk of physical irritation or injury. Plus, it creates a massive amount of psychological distress when a man is continually unable to reach a climax despite lengthy stimulation. Let's shift gears a bit and look at how all of this evolves across a person's lifespan. Because time isn't just about minutes on a clock, it's heavily dictated by our age. The chronological evolution of male sexual health is a completely natural medical reality. Our biology changes, and I want to reassure you right now that shifts over these decades are entirely expected and totally normal. So when a guy is in his 20s and 30s, testosterone is generally at its peak. This brings fast physical recovery, easy arousal, high libido, you know the drill. But as he transitions into his 30s and 40s, the impacts of daily life really start to hit hard. Career stress, weight gain, poor sleep, alcohol, all of these start to affect the ability to maintain erections the way he used to. Then, moving into the 40s, 50s, and beyond, men naturally experience lower testosterone. They might need more stimulation and longer physical arousal times. Blood flow can also be impacted by underlying medical conditions like diabetes or high cholesterol. But hear this clearly. Men in their 50s and well beyond can absolutely still have highly satisfying, wonderful sex as long as they maintain their overall physical health. To further understand this, let's compare the specific external and internal factors that skew our timing in either direction. Basically, what makes sex shorter? Well, high stress, lack of sleep, anxiety, smoking, and heavy alcohol use are major culprits, right alongside underlying health issues like diabetes or cardiovascular disease. Now, what makes sex stretch out way too long? Often it's medication. Certain antidepressants are actually famous for delaying ejaculation. Heavy chronic alcohol use can numb the nervous system. Neurological diseases, profound stress, and hormonal imbalances can also make it incredibly difficult to finish. The takeaway here? Our daily lifestyle and our medicine cabinets heavily dictate our sexual performance. So, knowing all of this, how do we pivot the narrative? How do we stop just diagnosing the problem while staring anxiously at the ceiling and actually start looking at actionable medical solutions that empower us? Well, we need to shift our focus completely away from the stopwatch and entirely onto proactive, holistic health management. Here are the fundamental lifestyle changes you can start making right now. It starts with exercising regularly and managing body weight. Because honestly, blood flow is absolutely everything. You also need to prioritize adequate sleep and actively reduce daily stress. Cutting out smoking and heavily reducing alcohol will yield massive benefits, as will working with your doctor to manage any chronic diseases like diabetes or high blood pressure. And finally, don't overlook Kegel exercises to strengthen your pelvic floor muscles. Now, sure, there are specific physical techniques out there, like the start-stop or squeeze methods, which can help with control. But foundational, holistic physical health, that absolutely has to come first. Of course, sometimes lifestyle changes just aren't quite enough. And you know what? That is perfectly okay. Here is a clear, totally non-judgmental checklist of when it's time to seek a clinical assessment from a doctor. You should make an appointment if you are experiencing premature ejaculation on a regular basis that disrupts your life, if you have consistently incomplete erections or unusually high difficulty ejaculating. The exact same goes for a severe drop in libido, experiencing pain during intercourse, or if a loss of confidence is actively harming your relationship. Getting an early assessment is a normal, healthy step for optimization, not a punishment. It allows your doctor to rule out hormone imbalances, psychological factors, or underlying hidden diseases. I want to highlight this powerful quote straight from our source material because it just perfectly summarizes the medical paradigm shift we've been exploring today. It says, the goal of treatment isn't to make sex last as long as possible, but to ensure healthy, individualized sexual well-being. Think about that. It's not about winning a race, it's about making sure your body and your mind are healthy and functioning in a way that actually brings you joy. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time you feel that wave of performance anxiety creeping in, I want you to ask yourself, are you focusing on the stopwatch, or are you prioritizing your actual well-being, your communication, and your mutual happiness? It is time to permanently drop the unrealistic expectations, throw out the clock, and focus on a holistic, healthy, and connected approach moving forward. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.